I'm Dr. Barney Roca, the Spokane chiropractor. Today I'm hosting Donuts for Democracy.
Kevin Fagan, running for Washington's 5th Congressional District as a Democrat, and very excited to get into some of the questions and introduce myself.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming out today, taking the time and meeting with me to answer some questions. I'm an undecided voter, and of the little bit of polling I have seen of this district, aside from the incumbent, undecided is the largest group out there. And it does seem like it's only going to take, with such a divided field, it's only going to take a relatively small percentage of the vote in order to finish in the top two and move on to the general. But the first question I want to ask, you all the campaigns outside of the incumbent, in my opinion, are somewhat of a long shot. So why take on this somewhat daunting task of running against a well-funded incumbent as a Democrat in a very conservative district?
Well, I'll definitely say not because it was easy. It's worth taking on because for a few reasons. One, this incumbent is, I'd say, uniquely vulnerable relative to the more than a decade of Kathy McMorris Rogers in this district. And so the last I had checked, it might have changed over the summer, but especially through the spring, incumbent Baumgartner's fundraising numbers were a lot lower than CMR's up to this point. But again, the reason isn't just because it's a weak incumbent, it's because there's an opportunity and national wave that we're sort of seeing headed towards Democrats, or at least non-Republicans. And frankly, that, especially for me as a younger person, that I view there's an opportunity to run a campaign that we've been seeing win successfully throughout the country. And I from a personal perspective, from my own end, it's just seeing the effects of Baumgartner's cuts to healthcare, to the environment, to this region, not being a great advocate for Eastern Washington when it comes to getting federal dollars here. It's worth at least trying, because the alternative of continuing to have a Republican-controlled House and Baumgartner in this seat isn't great for me. And I view it as not great for our future as well. And so that's why, to me, it's worth fighting for.
Right on. When you've been on the campaign trail now for a while, the ballots are out, you've had an opportunity to meet with a number of people. What do you think is the most important issue to the people of the Washington's 5th District?
Yeah, I'd say we've been out now for months, just going Clarkston, Walla Walla, Pullman, Colville, and pretty consistently, you get different flavors of it in each place, but it's healthcare in some form. Whether it could be seniors on Medicare who hate their standard Medicare plan because it doesn't provide comprehensive benefits like dental and vision, or it could be some of the folks in the rural communities that have a genuine fear, and for good reason, of their rural hospital closing. And there's many reasons for that, but Baumgartner's recent cuts with the Big Beautiful Bill last year that took away and made Medicaid more difficult to access, those have an effect on the bottom line of some of these hospitals. And I know that there's a lot of, from a personal level, difficulties with people accessing healthcare, and then for what those healthcare centers provide to rural communities as well, there's a lot of genuine fear around what if they go, what if they're not able to pencil it out at the end of the day. And so, I just consistently hear that as a concern.
Yeah, healthcare definitely seems important, and one of the things I've heard from a couple other candidates is Medicare for all. And I see here that you also support a Medicare for all, but the first thing you did was point out the gaps in Medicare And Medicare has premiums, it has gaps in coverages, it has maximum coverages, and oftentimes when I see patients with Medicare, they have either a supplement or a Medicare Advantage plan to go along with their Medicare to make it useful. So they're paying for an additional insurance on top of their Medicare. Maybe you can help me understand how Medicare for All is a solution when we already know that Medicare is broken.
It's something that where we could both fix Medicare and have it applied universally, in my opinion. These gaps in coverage are policy decisions to have the difference between a Medicare Advantage and a Medicare plan. In my opinion, I guess Medicare Advantage for All feels like a more apt description of what we might be striving for universal health care. And again, so it is comprehensive. So you do have guaranteed care in wherever you are, to the extent that that's possible. I know some folks in rural areas, it's a lot harder to have that guaranteed care, but that the Medicare for All solution, we could also call it universal health care as well. For me, it's more about the individual knowing that they have access to health care and will not have exorbitant costs attached to it. So it would be completely separate of private insurance and private care.
Yeah, it does feel more like a slogan than a solution to me. It's easy to say, maybe it resonates with some people, Medicare for All, but even with the Medicare Advantage plans and the Medicare supplements, they come with their own issues. This is an example. If a patient does not have a supplement or Advantage plan in addition to the Medicare, their copayment is only like $6-7, maybe $8. But then the Advantage plan, which you have to bill first, changes their benefits. So now they have a higher copayment or caps on their coverage that they otherwise wouldn't have had. So they're playing games with what they pay and what they don't pay and how they pay it in order to make a profit. And these are, none of these companies that are offering these plans are doing so out of the goodness of their heart. These are profit generating systems.
Which companies are you talking about specifically?
Any Medicare Advantage plan or any supplement plan. If for me, I'm a chiropractor, Spokane chiropractor. If a patient has Medicare and comes to see me as a Medicare provider, their copayment is $6, $7, $8. But if they have one of these supplement plans or these Advantage plans, they have a much higher copayment, and they may not have any benefit at all because of the nature of these supplement plans. So Medicare Advantage for All, and from my perspective, just means even worse than Medicare for All. But it does seem like it is a slogan more than a policy. And do you have a particular, what is it, exactly what you're fighting for? Because I see here you want to reinstitute the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act and reduce the cuts to Medicaid. Yep. But again, these aren't necessarily solutions. These are stopgap measures just to get us back to where we were, which was still a broken healthcare system. We've had a broken healthcare system for generations. So do you have a clear vision of what you would be fighting for in Congress if elected?
Yeah, you're right. I believe if we patched on Medicare for All or Medicare Advantage to the existing for-profit framework of our healthcare system, you're right. It will Medicare Advantage might be worse. The point that I was more going towards is that we do need to look at things from the systems level within healthcare. And I totally appreciate your perspective as someone who, for me, as a consumer, I have my own lived experience how interacting with the healthcare system has been. But for you as a doctor, you probably have your own unique perspective on interacting with these systems for whether it's insurance or, the the providers of care and that whole network. And so, I mean, I agree that I think our healthcare system is broken and that we need large systems level changes in order to arrive at a place that is beneficial for both providers and people seeking care. And so the Medicare for All would not include private insurers. And so you mentioned that like Medicare Advantage has these for-profit companies that are seeking to, again, make a profit off of people's care. And I think those two things are largely in conflict whether it's health insurance companies, whether it's hospitals, if the primary outcome that we're striving for is profit from healthcare, then we're really not going to arrive at a happy and healthy society. And so that's why I'm in favor of a public, standardized form of care. In Medicare for All, yes, it is a slogan, a tagline representing a system that does not have for-profit health insurance within.
And what does this universal health care, what does this vision include? You said dental and vision.
Yeah, dental, vision, access to care. It essentially would be all of the care that one needs that is elective? So elective would not be covered, and that you could seek care for those sort of procedures elsewhere.
Which also leaves room for a private insurance market where they could cover those things. One of the aspects of universal health care that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about touches in on public safety and also a little bit of the housing crisis, which is mental health care. Right now we treat addiction like a crime, even though we know it is a disease, because we don't have a means of providing the proper treatment for this disease. And I've spoken with a number of police officers and police officer organizations and law enforcement, and they often will say that in this country we're dealing with a mental health crisis. Mm-hmm. And do you believe that universal health care that's not-for-profit, like you described, what role would mental health play in that plan?
Ideally, significantly, and I think that there is a mental health crisis. I mean, from so many so many ways you could look at it. Like from the public safety perspective, absolutely, but just from a people suffering perspective, from just people who don't even know that what's wrong yet because they can't see a primary care provider or a mental health professional in the first place. And so, I would absolutely think that mental health support and care would be within that universal solution.
So then how do you pay for it? And you got mental health, you got dental, you got vision, you got all your basic medical needs. How do you pay for this plan?
I've seen estimates that put nationalized costs at between $3 to $3.5 trillion for a system like this that would be comprehensive in care. And we currently pay for both the care and premiums that we have as a society for our healthcare costs. It's something like $4 trillion. So our end of day, our costs would go down, but it would be more taken out of your paycheck. It would be a tax that essentially goes into the healthcare pool at the national level.
So it'd be a tax?
Yes.
Okay. And speaking about taxes, we've been there's always a debate, although a lot of people haven't talked about it, about how to get some of regressive taxes ended, how to get ultra wealthy people to pay their fair share in order to fund things like universal health care. Do you have a plan to make sure that everyone pays their fair share into a program to fund universal health care?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily need to go to universal health care, this plan, but I totally agree that we need to fix some of the things in our regressive tax code that are allowing multi-billionaires to become hundred billionaires like overnight, right? That escalation of wealth is really concerning. And so I'd say, frankly, removing some of the tax loopholes that allow this accumulation of wealth so rapidly. And so that could be having a capital gains tax that was was same rate as income tax. So I'm pretty sure right now capital gains is right around 20%, and then most income tax is higher than that. And so if we had a capital gains tax, especially for large volume stockholders, it would make that that we could close the gap a little bit from that tax burden. And then the inheritance tax as well. There's a lot of inheritance tax loopholes with the ultra wealthy passing down their assets after they've accumulated significant value through the duration of their lifetime. And so those specific tax loopholes I would look at closing, and potentially also a one-time wealth taxes as well on billionaires, quite frankly, like that level of wealth. And so a lot of times we can't just raise the top marginal income tax rate because they're taking very little salary at this point. And so if we can, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but the wealth is a lot of times tied up in many different assets and many different things. And so I would look at supporting that. And I think we're going to have a good blueprint of how that might work with Californians if they go through with it.
And then if you mentioned this is going to, if you're going to have this healthcare system, you're going to have to pay a tax instead of a premium. I know in this district, we enjoy a relatively high minimum wage, but there are many parts of the country where the minimum wage is around $7, less than $8 an hour. And there are several states that still have a tipped minimum wage of $2.13 an hour, and which I got to enjoy as a bartender and server and other and various positions.
Yeah.
While there may have been an opportunity to earn a tip, not every hour that you work. There's plenty of side work that has to be done every shift, where you're paid $2.13 for an hour's wage. And so, do you have a plan? Because I can't imagine taking even more taxes out of some of these paychecks and then expecting somebody to be able to afford anything. And we already have a social safety net where people are working full time and with ultra low wages. In order to survive, they still need food stamps and Medicaid and other things while working full time. So that's when it becomes more of a corporate welfare system, which is actually where our social safety net is actually subsidizing Walmart and these mega companies to pay ultra low wages and keep people poor. And if you're going to add a tax, you're going to make them poorer. So do you have a plan in order to address these ultra low wages if you're elected to Congress?
I would support raising the national minimum wage to at least $20 an hour for the exact reasons that you said, cost of living increases. And I think we should look at, the having a tipped wage difference or not. It makes it very difficult. I feel like on a state-by-state basis that we have different tipped wages versus not. I'm quite confident in Washington State, even if you work a job that would normally be considered tipped wages, you still are guaranteed that minimum wage and anything else on top of that. And so nationally, I think we could definitely look at that. But then it's a great point about when folks are underpaid and also on SNAP or Medicaid, that is a corporate handout. And I think I have not looked at specific proposals on addressing that. But I think you're absolutely on the right track that we shouldn't have working class folks like that footing the burden for anything, any tax increase in this case. And I will say, like, as you mentioned, the tax increase, it a lot of times might look like it might match someone's premium that they're already paying. But obviously the difference is the premium isn't the care itself. The premium is just, getting that basic access to health insurance, where a lot of times you're still having to spend $5,000 to $9,000 on your deductible for the care itself. And so I think if we could, like, if that tax was actually meant that you had access and fully comprehensive health care, with mental health care as well, then it would go a lot further than just your premium. So I think in the long term, you absolutely could justify it, but you're right, you can't just, folks, working families, working class people can't just afford another tax right now. And so I think we'd have to look at ways that we could, it would take a lot to implement something like this. And I would not want to see working class people foot the burden for it.
And taking the minimum wage from right around $7 an hour to $20 an hour is, very roughly, it's more than double. It's nearly 3 times the minimum wage now. I think you can expect the private sector and also your colleagues on the other side of the aisle to fight against it, and they're going to claim this is going to raise prices. And right now, I think we're already facing substantial inflation that is persistent, and the cost of living has gone up significantly. I think that's a really important issue for people, and they do need money to pay the ever-increasing cost of living. But what protections would need to be in place to ensure that this nearly tripling of the minimum wage doesn't result in higher prices? And then if there is some kind of modifier, do you see how this, where the cost of, because it's also regional too, where if your wage is directly proportional or related to the cost of living, and then as wages increase, cost of living increases, which drives wages up, which then drives costs up. You get an ever-increasing cycle that forces it doesn't work. It doesn't compute. So, how would you suggest implementing a $20 per hour minimum wage without dramatically increasing the cost of goods and services?
I mean, in the absence of price ceilings on those increases from the governments down to corporations, I mean, depends on the industry, but I've seen that frequently. A lot of, like, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's could be a larger corporation like Walmart, like direct staff expenses and wages usually are between a fifth to a quarter to a third, like 20 to 30% of their expenses. And so if that chunk of, and in this case those are the wages you pay your employees, if that chunk increased by like twofold, if it more than doubled for some of these places, that percentage of their expenses would increase for sure. And that would likely result in price increases. But the difference here is that going from $7 or $8 an hour for someone who making that to $20 an hour vastly, it disproportionately increases their material wealth and well-being relative to the prices that you see at the store, because that 20 to 30% is only a fraction of that store's costs. You wouldn't expect it to raise proportionate to, they're not going to double their prices because their wages doubled, because it's only a fraction of their costs. And so what you'd see is the, lowest income working class people would have significantly more money in their pockets, and they're the most likely to spend this money anyways instead of save it. And that's good for the economy, right? Like, if we have more money in the hands of these people that see that material difference, they're so much more likely to spend it. And that I think that's far outweighs the price increases we might see from businesses.
Okay. I noticed on your website that housing was an important issue, and I do think we have had a housing crisis unfolding in America over generations.
Mm-hmm.
So could you help me understand your housing policy a little bit better?
Yeah. I think so I would like to see the federal government do kind of two main routes. One, which is providing sort of a guidebook and outlining how localities can increase their housing stock and supply. And so a lot of times local zoning regulations are up to cities and counties when it comes to where you can build housing, where you can build commercial areas. And so I would like to see the government take this seriously by sort of giving the toolbook, the guide to local governments on how they could increase housing supply. And then also for the federal government to take a more active role in enabling more public housing as well, and showing that we can have a successful public housing program at the federal level.
When you increase stock and supply, I mean, wouldn't that have a adverse effect on what most people would call their greatest asset? So if you own a home and you have a current price, a current value, you have a tremendous amount of your wealth tied up into that asset. If you increase the supply, you're going to decrease the value of that asset. So many homeowners are going to lose a significant portion of their greatest asset.
One, I disagree that homeowners are seeing price decreases at this point.
Well, not right now, but if you're saying you want to increase stock and supply.
Yeah.
So if you do increase supply, you will decrease demand, which will drive prices down.
So, I mean, what I would say is, does someone's the current people who've gotten lucky enough or worked hard enough to be at that point where they got in before housing really started getting crazy? I mean, especially here in Spokane, the median cost of a home, I'm pretty sure, has doubled in the last 6 or 7 years. And so for those folks that did get in, that got great timing, do they have a right to home ownership? And then that everyone else is just locked out in this case because we don't want to have their home value not continue to increase significantly.
Well, it's not a matter of increase, it's decrease, and nobody is locked out. Anybody can go purchase a home as long as they can afford it.
Right.
So that doesn't enter to the equation. It's not preventing somebody from buying a home, but don't they have a right to the equity that they've been able to build? And so I mean, it goes both ways. But if the solution is to increase stock, I think you need to anticipate, just like with the wages. If you want to nearly triple wages, I think you need to anticipate that the counter argument will be this will increase prices. If you want to increase the supply of housing, I think you need to anticipate that the argument will be the increase in supply will result in a decrease in value, which will have a direct impact on people that own homes and devalue their greatest asset. Because if you think about most people that own homes, they don't have a stock portfolio because they've invested all of their money into their home, right? They're not working on their hedge fund on the weekend. They're working on the hedge. They're investing in their home, right? So this is an important issue to them. This is a critical thing. That yes, some people did see a great deal of wealth and value grow over the last number of years, and they don't want to see it wiped out either. So they're protective of it.
I would argue that like I stand by building more housing. The amount of housing that it would, without knowing the exact number, like I think we can find a scenario where we still build a lot of housing here regionally to support growth as well. Where I think this region is set up for more population increase and not have folks' home values decrease. They just might not double in 5 years. I don't think that's a sustainable rate for anyone. And I think homeowners are, of course, very happy that they got in before that boom. But we're going to have to live with the level of the housing rate increases, housing price increases that is lower than it doubling over 5 years. That
well, it has. I mean, I don't know if the current values haven't been continuing to sky. There was a spike, and it has leveled off, and for the past 2 or 3 years, there hasn't the tremendous growth we saw during the pandemic, which is extenuating circumstances. We haven't continued to see that. And why did we see it? Well, during the pandemic, you weren't building more homes, so we had a decrease in supply, which led to an increase in demand, and you saw an increase in prices. So it is the same principles of supply and demand playing out, but we had extenuating circumstances compounded by the length of time to get permits, but just the supply chain. We didn't have the materials available, and people weren't working. We were telling people, don't stay home, don't go out and work. So we weren't building new homes, and so we saw there was a perfect storm to create a scenario when prices increased. But they can look, and we have had public housing in the past. When I was quite small and in New York, there was a lot of housing projects, but they were a plight on the community, and they were projects that were abandoned and burned, demolished, destroyed, and replaced. So without going back to a program that we already know doesn't work, I think you said you're looking for new ideas. When I hear public housing and public housing units, that's the first thing that comes to mind are the housing projects in New York City that were a plight on the community. Do you have so is there something novel about your housing project that you could help me understand how this would be a new or innovative idea?
I guess I'm also curious, from your perspective, what was, like, why were those projects, what was the failure of those? I know you mentioned plight, like, that it wasn't great, but what made those projects a failure, in your opinion?
Well, we have to go back. We're dealing in the 80s. We're dealing with the crack epidemic. They became gangs. So you're taking people that have challenges in life. There was wages haven't changed much since then, but wages were low. So working all day was not a way to get ahead. And you had drugs and gangs. You have a poor community. You're forcing these people into a very tight, small area. They take control, and then the selling drugs, and it becomes, and then gang wars and fights and things. Even here in Spokane, we're seeing where the kids get together and somebody gets shot, right? And that was just magnified in New York City with these housing projects, because you're taking, 50,000 people, putting them into one city block, into a massive building, and this is the natural result. Yeah. Compound with a weak economy, high prices, and some of the factors we have in place right now. We have an economy that is good for some and bad for others. We have wages that are low. When I see, especially in other parts of the country, but it can be very difficult to deal with the fact that you're working all day, every day, and when the paycheck comes, it's already gone, because childcare is so unbelievably expensive. Food and energy is so amazingly expensive that it certainly becomes despair, because there's no way out. So then you start trying to find other ways out, and that's where the gray market and the black market are born. And we have such a high consolidation density of people in a housing project, and they're all in a similar circumstance. They're going to find a way through the gray and the black market, which is illegal activity, and that illegal activity results in more illegal activity, which becomes a blight on the community. So that's my perspective,
Yeah.
and that was New York City. That wasn't Spokane. But you're going to Congress in order to fight for federal issues on a national level, not just here in Spokane.
Yeah.
But even here in Spokane, I was just shocked to learn. Just met with the Logan neighborhood meeting. Just met with a couple police officers from SPD, and they're saying those shootings are a very real problem in Spokane. If not every day, every other day, somebody is getting shot, and it's not necessarily making the news, but the groups of kids are getting together and they're racing their cars and they're having a good time. But you get enough people together, somebody's going to have a gun, somebody's going to start a fight, and then somebody's going to get shot, and it's happening on a regular basis right here in our community. So that's why I wanted to, when you talk about housing, I think it is an important issue, but I think we have to be very careful about how we go about addressing that issue. And we've tried things like public housing projects before, and like you said, this is somewhat of a local issue. How do you want to develop your community is largely left up to the community. So that's not necessarily something that you will be deciding in Congress, and you want to create a guide that you can then distribute. But this isn't mandating, this is just advice essentially that you're suggesting.
Yes, I guess it would be kind of advice, and I don't support mandating for the exact reasons that you said. Nationally, coming that down from the national level, each community is going to be completely different in their existing zoning regulations and their existing, communities, and so we shouldn't mandate any form of housing development. I personally would like to see more, the terms transit-oriented development, more housing built in areas that are kind of within an urban core of a city. So if we take Spokane, for example, this could be along Division, where we're expecting to have more investments in our public transit system there, and we have significant vacant land there along Division. If we can, housing projects that are not just a continuation of the suburbs, bringing more cars onto the street, bringing more traffic and congestion into our city in general. And so I would like to have housing options as well, and not just single family homes that are being built, ever expanding into the suburbs. But that's just that, again, more of a personal preference, and I think this guidebook of sorts could be how, doing housing projects of all types, how the federal government could enable some of these things, whether it could be tax credits, right? It could be
We've handed out so many tax credits. I mean, we've got magnesium. We've got a massive complex where those people don't pay any local taxes.
Yeah.
They built what was supposed to be
Sorry.
Magnesium.
Yeah.
Magnesium is a road just up here in Nevada Heights.
Okay.
And at the corner of Nevada and Magnesium, it's Magnesium something apartments, which they were given massive tax exemptions, so they pay no local taxes, but yet are home to more than 1,000 units, so more than 1,000 people. There's families that live there that consume police, fire, first responders, but they don't pay into those systems. They repave that road, but because they have so much more traffic on that road for all the people going into that apartment complex, but they didn't pay 1 cent into our local road budget.
They don't pay any local taxes.
No, and they were given tax exemptions, which is what you just suggested, was more tax incentives. If you go over to Costco and you see the new housing that's being developed over there, you'll see these small solar panels on top of the garages. Why are they there? Because they were given tax incentives to build these homes, which are not affordable. They're driving the cost of housing up, not down. And the solar power, the energy that they're deriving is small. It's not going to move the needle when compared to a three bedroom, 2-bath house. but they do it just enough to get that tax incentive. So we've seen tax incentives as being a means to address housing, but we've seen it fail over and over and over again. And it's not a new idea. It's something that's been done, is being done, and we're watching it fail miserably, both from apartments, where that particular apartment complex drove up the cost of all apartments in the area. It didn't decrease, because now the new apartment they were leasing at $1,100. So then the one that was at $750 is now at $850. Well, that's cheaper than $1,100, right? So even though it was older, and we saw it unfold, and those people are not paying into. They're making millions of dollars off of that asset every year, and they're not paying into local taxes. But then we're turned around, and the homeowners are asked to pay more and more and more in local taxes to fund subsidies for wealthy land developers to go out and build just enough housing to where demand is kept artificially high, and they continue to bring in massive amounts of money and pay no taxes. Local taxes. I'm sure that they do pay some taxes, but in terms of the things that we're asked to pay for, they're not contributing in any way. But they're making unbelievable amounts of money on their house. Most homeowners aren't making any money. They're spending money on their house. But they're asked to pay more and more as more and more things go unfunded.
Yeah.
So another thing that we always hear in the news, and I'm sure is becoming a growing issue, is it's the use of AI and the growing role AI is playing in our community and the development of data centers and the loss of jobs. So this is something that the next Congress, or maybe they'll at least need to start addressing. So do you have an opinion on AI and what you're going to fight for in DC if you're elected to represent us in Congress?
Yeah, I'd say I have an opinion on it. I have an opinion on how the federal government should at least start to regulate it. I think AI is a tool right now, and it can be used for good and bad. I think I've called it I've said before, it's at this point probably maybe 20 to 30% good, 70 to 80% bad as far as the what it could be used for, and done by our federal government. So I would like to see the Congress establish a committee on AI. I would like to see us regulate the AI companies themselves pretty, like at least establishing a playing field for AI regulation. So that could be policies and safeguards around releasing a new large language model before it becomes public. So making sure that there's at least some independent vetting of the model that you're releasing into the public to ensure it does not cause harm. Like I don't know if it was ChatGPT or one of the larger companies that had a model that talked to kid into committing suicide, right? Like we should have significant vetting and regulations before these models are released for public use. I've also seen the idea thrown around of a sovereign wealth fund around the profits from large AI companies. And the main argument is that these companies are directly profiting off of something that was made and generated through all of what is public, right? Like all of the information on the web, all of these things that has been sort of the public consciousness, and they've privatized the profits off of that. And so you have these large language models that benefit from public input, but then privatize the profit. And so this sovereign wealth fund would be the federal government taking a percentage share within these companies to ensure they're developed well and safely, and then also using the profits from that fund to reinvest into communities or whichever programs the federal government sees fit. I'd say I'm quite concerned with the surveillance state that's developing right now and how AI could enable it. And so whether it's flock cameras that are in every community around the country, or something similar, it doesn't need to be flock, but it's similar type of camera license plate monitoring system that allows for an absurd amount of data to be collected on the ground, and then using these large language models to decipher that and know, obviously the federal government can know where people are pretty easily, but the scale that it's developing in the absence of federal regulation is what it concerns me significantly. And using these models for not great reasons. We're seeing local police departments and sheriff's offices around the country using flock cameras to track down ex-girlfriends or partners. We have very little regulation around surveillance data that I would like to see change, and so that could be needing a warrant for a digital search, or kind of a digital search warrant in a case that would need to go through the same process as you'd need for a physical search warrant. Anyways, that was a lot, covering a lot of topics. Didn't even get into data centers, but I think we need the federal government to act now. I do believe that what we need to at least get on top of this and start getting more experts within the federal government who can also know these technologies too, because frankly a lot of our Congress isn't going to know the first thing about interacting with AI and how to regulate it.
You mentioned something about public data, how a lot of this is profits that are built on public data. Well, aren't Google, isn't that essentially a platform that collects data and builds massive profits off that data? So where do you put the line on? Because if it's just because it's public data, well then Google Maps is based upon public information, and we use Google Maps and they put ads on Google Maps and they generate revenue from public data. So should we start taxing them now and start collecting some money for the, where's the line? Where does it start and where does it stop?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think there's I don't know, the use for this public data, and maybe the difference is it's not just public data in this case that's influencing large language models, that they've actually, from what I've seen, I don't know if they're still doing it, there's been significant lawsuits over using books and other what might be considered protected or copyright information to influence their models as well, to provide that foundation of understanding for their model, and so that feels fundamentally different than, say, Google search.
All right. Well, if you listen to some music, just pick a band that you particularly like. Question they're often asked is, what about your influences? Jack White comes to mind because I saw an interview recently and he pointed to the Beatles and Arlo Guthrie and Woody Guthrie and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin as being one of his heroes. And then he was exposed to their music, and then he used that music as influence and inspiration to create music. So it's essentially a very similar thing, and it could be the same for any artist, anyone that's created anything. I may even think that you didn't come up with the term Medicare for all, right? So you're using, right? You've been inspired by somebody else, right? And you're using it now. Same as Jack White, he exposed himself to saying he was inspired and then used it to generate his own music. AI is doing it. So where does the line start and where does it stop? Because now we say, oh well, this clearly was inspired by the Beatles. You all Paul McCartney or whoever owns his music, which probably isn't Paul McCartney anymore. Money.
Well, I mean, I feel like there's a difference between inspiration and parroting for like. I don't think AI takes inspiration from the data it consumes. It is made up of that. Like it's not inspired by the all of the data that's input into it. That is what it's generates its output based off of. And so I think it's different from inspiration in the sense that, like, to use your music example, if Jack White wanted to use Paul McCartney's the exact tune that was in one of the songs, he actually would need to compensate, and it would. I can't remember the term that I'm thinking of. You might know it.
Plagiarism?
Not plagiarism. If you're gonna, it's kind of making your own song, but if you use the same beats and notes that make up a different song, you still have to give credit to that original producer or something. And from what I understand, there's a form of compensation for that. And so that is when they do use the exact makeup of a different artist or song, there is direct compensation. And I can't remember the name of it, but it feels like it's becoming more common, like a lot of songs nowadays, where it feels like you might be listening to an older song and then it's like Dua Lipa on the track, right? Where, oh, they just took the exact melody or something like that behind the words. And from what I understand, there's a direct form of compensation that happens when they do that. So, for the purposes of this, yes, because the data that makes up large language models is not theirs, and it's one-to-one, the exact inputs are from other human contributors, then yes, I do think there needs to be a form of, because its outputs are directly tied to what we've put into it. And I guess to use your Google Maps example, it feels like they're providing a service independent of, like, the Google Maps model is made up of a bunch of, like, I mean, quite literally, it's locations that they don't own. It's not like Donut Parade is theirs, but that's not the service that they provide. It's the routing technology that backs up the software. In the case of a large language model, they just distill information, and all of that is based off of our inputs and what the public, in this case, the public contribution to those models. So I do think that it is different, comparing like Google or Google Maps to large language models. But I'm very open to continue talking about it, and I think it's important to, if any policies developed around this, to have very clear, like, where does this stop, where does it start, for this case.
Well, we only have just a couple minutes left. The last thing I was going to mention, anything you want to talk about in closing, as you had mentioned, flock cameras, and I did speak with some other people about it. In my opinion, over the past, again, generations, a lot of the things that worry me are not a result of this administration or of this Congress, but of the establishment's effect over generations, from when I was a child to now. And from when I was a child to now, I feel like we've seen an erosion of our Fourth Amendment rights. We've seen civil asset forfeiture. We're seeing flock cameras. We're seeing the surveillance state with emails, phone calls, text messages, and things. As far as I know, 100% of those are searchable by the U.S. government and can be used against me at any time, right? So we are living in a surveillance state. It's very 1984, and we have constitutional protections. So if you are elected to Congress, I'd be interested to hear what exactly it is you would fight for and what you would do in order to protect my Fourth Amendment rights.
Yeah, I think, one of those things that I was mentioning is just having the same requirements for a physical search, search warrant be relevant for digital searches. We are, and honestly, I'd say, definitely looking at, I can't remember the name of the act, but essentially the post 9/11
Patriot Act.
Patriot Act.
It's just temporary.
It's gonna go away here any day now.
Yeah.
Like having Congress look at that and a lot of the provisions within it to determine their relevance. I think we, like you said, the establishment has taken away a lot of the civil liberties under the guise of threat from terrorism, threat from whether it's domestic or abroad, and now we're seeing, a pretty, frankly disturbing federal report on Cuba's influence in our politics over the last 40 years. That in order to kind of create a false flag and justify more surveillance of anyone that disagrees, any dissidents to our federal government. It is very 1984, and I think in the absence of throwing the entire federal administration out the door, you're right, this has been an erosion. It didn't start with the Trump administration. I think we do need to see Congress take back some of that power that's been sort of forfeited to the Department of Homeland Security, some of our federal investigative agencies, to give civil liberties back to some of the people. And because for the exact reasons we're seeing what the federal government can get away with as far as not needing any form or justification to monitor individuals' text messages or phone calls. I view that as pretty disturbing, and I think Congress could act to create civil protections in the absence of a constitutional amendment, which I would also support as far as something more relevant to our digital era when it relates to the Fourth Amendment and a sort of almost Bill of Rights for the people as in a new digital era where it leaves a lot less room for ambiguity that can't be chipped away at, like the Fourth Amendment. Wrap it up?
Yeah, do you have anything you want to say?
Well, I really appreciated the conversation, and I think it's very important for people running for elected office, people who are in elected office, to be held to standards and frankly grilled on their policy as far as the realism, how it's going to be implemented. And so I appreciate you doing that today. Honestly, I only have an interest in making tangible, lasting change as a representative. I think that's what makes it worth doing, in my opinion. It's what makes it, like, by refusing corporate PAC money, by sort of going about things the hard way, creating change that's meaningful and impactful is the only reason why I'm considering doing this, and want to be a representative for this district for everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.